Before we dig in, a quick thank you to the sponsors ready to grow with the Soil Sisters. Tejas Tonic is the official beverage of the Texas Soil Sisters. We especially love that the hemp for Tejas Tonic is organically farmed in the Texas Hill Country, with farms in both Dripping Springs and Lukenbach, Texas. The Soil Sisters podcast is powered by B&P Electric. Whether you're building, remodeling, installing low-voltage landscape lighting, or in need of an inspection, B&P is your Central Texas electrical contractor. Find links to our sponsors in the podcast show notes or head over to txsoilsisters.co. You're listening to the Soil Sisters podcast, where we dig in on family farming and ranching, regenerative agriculture, healthy living, and planting seeds in our community. We invite you to listen, subscribe, and grow with the Soil Sisters. Hi, y'all. I'm Joanna Newting, joined by my blood, soul, and soil sister, Crystal, at day 2 of the Southern Family Farmers and Food Systems Conference. Welcome to the show.
So excited to have our dear friend, Tim Auld, with us today.
This has been a long time coming.
It has been a very long time coming.
Good morning, y'all.
Yay. Welcome.
Yay. You're looking spiffy. You have a big presentation coming up this afternoon.
I put a button up on today to make sure I'm looking nice for everyone.
I like it. So you actually were pretty involved this weekend. You were part of a 3-day, was it a grazing school? What was going on this weekend at your property?
It was so awesome. So what got put together as a pre-conference grazing masterclass, 3 different ranches, grazing operations, mostly in Caldwell County, similar soil type. We started at Dr. Ken Mix's place, which is in the Staples area on the San Marcos River, about 50 acres, and he's grazing cattle. So we started there. Had about 35 people that qualified or got the scholarships and paid to come, plus, in total about 50. And we just shared a lot of knowledge. We had Noble Research Institute, Holistic Management International, and Understanding Agriculture had educators there. And so what we did is we did an introduction with the rancher, give a history, and then their goal and their mission and what they're wanting to do. And then we passed it over and we split up in 3 groups, and we had each of those educators have about a 2.5-hour session with a third of the group. And then those groups would rotate to a new educator at each new site. And those educators focused, they pre-planned to split the content to focus on, some put a shovel in the dirt and in the soil and assessed soil structure, looked for, all those things that are good, healthy indicators. Then we did some grazing planning dialogue out in the field and some learning how to assess your forage quantity and quality. And so we did about a 3-hour on-farm segment, and then we drove back to Texas State at campus, and we did some lecture in one of the ag lecture halls, and had some really stimulating dialogue. So day 3 was at our farm, and got to have everyone come and got to share with them what I'm doing and our history of the farm and the transition we're making and the buy-in and support that I'm getting with my family, and then kind of the vision and goals. So it was good feedback.
I love that.
It's so great. And I will say, because I'm the babysitter over at Tim's farm when he's not around, and so being able to see how things have changed and the biomass that has accumulated out there over this last growing season has been amazing. So I know you had to have been so proud having all of those people there and getting feedback from some green giants.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's really helpful. Some of the takeaways I took from that, this has been an interesting, I'm going to go back to the biomass statement that you were making. I'm really grateful to have some really good forage. Some of it's gotten away from me. It's really matured. Learning, one of the takeaways I took from this course about that was, I'm understocked right now because I'm starting small. I'm just getting my feet on the ground with the grazing operation. And I just don't have a lot of funds to go and purchase the amount of sheep, and then, complement it with some cattle, especially with cattle prices right now, to get the impact that I need and to keep that forage vegetative until I'm ready to let it go. And on wet years, we talked a lot in this pre-conference workshop about the difference in our management of our livestock in wet years versus dry years, and making sure that you're doing enough monitoring throughout your grazing plan to be able to see that coming before you're there or past it. And we talked a lot about, this is one of Wayne Knight with HMI's principles he was trying to hit back, is that, if we're not going back to that grazing plan and looking at where our forage is and when the last rains were, pick a date that if we haven't gotten that rain that's going to keep us vegetative, the importance of needing to destock potentially or find other places. And then also the way that we might manage differently in a wet growing season versus a dry growing season, in terms of the way we stack our animals up and dent and move quick, or slow it down just a little bit and barely take a little off the top and keep moving to try to keep everything vegetative. So for me, I've been a little tight, and then I'm understocked to begin with, so it's already a smaller animal impact. And so I've been moving a little slower than maybe I could have, to get back around and maybe keep some of this stuff that's grown really fast and starting to get a little less palatable, to keep it vegetative. And sometimes that might mean that you totally defer. For me, it would be over half of the 94 acres I have, and just really focus on spending the rest of this growing season in the half that I can keep really nourished, nutrient dense and vegetative. So really good dialogue that we had on some of those things. It was so awesome to spend 3 days getting to meet new people and reconnect with folks that I haven't seen in a couple of years. There's a little vulnerableness to it when they come out to your place
I can imagine.
And are sharing their wisdom and criticism. So.
Yeah.
Well, bless us, everyone. There's always room for criticism, I guess. But I really love that that's what you're talking about. When we went to the school, the Regen Ag School, just knowing about that kill date, like that we've got to destock by this date if we don't have rain by this time, it just really put things into perspective, and like the management aspect of it, like it's really something that gets dialed in. So I love that you're getting that support, even if it is sometimes a little critical.
Oh yeah, it's critical.
Yeah.
If we're not learning and we're not open-minded enough to take constructive criticism. And don't get me wrong, there was times where there was real dialogue with firm questions asked on the mindset, that whether it was us or during the educational portion, but it was healthy, it was respectful. There might be disagreements but so much of it tied back to our individual context and our goals, because it's like the decision you might make for that next paddock move or the next month, if your goal is keeping your animal condition coming into the rams coming in or the cattle coming in, might be different than if it's a different time of the year and you have a little more flexibility with the condition and you really want to use those animals to improve the soil. Because we had a lot of dialogue on, at times you can do both, but at some times you're sacrificing one for the other. And so it's easy to get lost in the monitoring and the reactions. That's my favorite thing to do. But then tying it back to what are you trying to have happen this time through, or what are you planning for next time through? So.
Well, and the idea that farming is not like other jobs where you can't just make a plan and that's what you stick to forever or the whole year or whatever. Like there's this level of adaptation that always has to be happening. And we saw Wayne yesterday, and he was talking about how he was a little nervous about the school having 3 different groups that potentially have 3 different philosophies on things, but how everything played so well together and there was such synergy among all these groups. And there's a conversation that's happening now about what is regenerative agriculture. And
we covered that.
And so that is the thing that's really interesting to me, is having Understanding Ag and HMI and what's
Noble
the
Research
Noble
Institute.
Research Institute
three major players who may not all have the exact same definition for regenerative agriculture, but all of their philosophies play well together. So tell me what that conversation was.
It was trying to really stay, everyone's aligned on the 6 principles of soil health, right? Like, and I'm not going to go through all of them now. They're widely known and available. And everyone really understands the fundamental importance of that, right? And how that drives the ecosystem processes. And then, the big thing that I think we talked about that this movement in grazing is trying to settle on is there's so many ways to interact with your forage that's in front of where you're grazing, and then the logic behind what's driving how you're interacting with it, right? And that's where opinions might differ on how much to take, how much to leave, how intensely to bring your animal impact in there. And that's where I think, the different organizations might spread out a little bit. And I don't think any one is necessarily better than the other. And most of it overlaps, right?
Yeah.
In this space and in this movement, whether it's the branding of, the certifications for our products or the buzzwords that we use for the type of grazing we're doing. We talked in kind of brief terms on, because there were some people that were new and they're like, there's so much information out there through these sources, and the paralysis by analysis kind of like, which one should I use? And that's where each of these entities is kind of trying to have themselves stand out just a little bit, and it's friendly, you get on Facebook and other sub things, not the entities that were here. And there's, you can get in the weeds a little bit on the comment section.
Yeah. Well, and that you have to do what's right for you. And this is the decisions that like, this feels good. Like you listen to everyone, and then the one that rings in your chest is the direction you go.
Yeah.
And that's, everything can work and nothing works based on how you feel about it and what you think and the way that you move forward. So when you understand, and it's funny because when I was picking flowers, oftentimes
I was looking at those when getting up here.
Thank you.
They're very pretty.
One, it shines, it's bright, and that's the one that I take. And I'm like, because I know when I go out there, the flowers know I'm coming out to gather you to come in my house, and it's like, hello, like it's just looking at you, pick me, like, and it's like, that's, I used to like feel like I need to ask every single one, but it's like once we set our intention and we begin moving forward in that, the obvious choice makes itself obvious.
Yeah.
I mean, it just kind of stands up and waves at you. So maybe for this pass through, the HMI grazing plan is what's working for me. And, I learned something from Wayne. It's like you want your cattle like at the peak of their weight or going down, like for the females when you're going to breed them.
Yeah.
And so this is what you're talking about. Like sometimes you're grazing for the grass and sometimes you're grazing for the animal. Like in what body condition does this animal need to be in to breed it? Well, that's not exactly what we need for our forage, but that's what we're doing because it's breeding season.
Yeah.
So we're dancing, we're bobbing and weaving, and we're paying attention, and we're understanding where we're going and what season is for this or that. So anyway, I love that. And we get to know that what is right for us isn't right for everyone else, but we have to be in our alignment and open to seeing that little shining flower that's saying, pick me.
I like that when you go out to the field, you're trying to look at those interactions. I similarly, my favorite thing to do is to go out, take Bella out of the paddock, and we go for a little paddock walk and let her off leash, get some energy out, some new smells, keep her stimulated. And I like to do my plant monitoring and look at the interactions between what plants are next to what's crawling up how's it recovering, what bugs are on what plants. And when you start getting that in tuned in your monitoring, like, it's there's so much knowledge and wealth out there and education. And sometimes you're monitoring of that interaction, what you think it might represent, you then watch another interaction and it's like, actually it was this,
Yes.
and tying that to your flowers, like when we start learning when those flowers start looking not so great and when they start wilting or when the bugs start eating their petals, that's nature telling you, you know, like if you're observing, it's like, oh, that flower is getting to the end of its individual flower life. And, you know, oh, a rain came and now there's some new ones. Like, and so it's cool that you're that in tune to see which ones are, you know, have done their thing and are now they're ready to cycle back.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
This is such a regenerative way of being. But when we're having this conversation, I think everyone in the back of their minds is saying, okay, well, the USDA and the NRCS and the FSA, they're going to want to call this something very specific in order to build programs around it, deliver funding, that kind of thing.
And it's got to stay bipartisan in its nature, or else we're going to lose one side or the other just on dogma and paradigm, which is two things that Wayne talked about in the lecture of the grazing course, and how everyone comes in with those things, you know, whether we're grazers, whether we're congressional representatives.
Yeah.
That's the conundrum right now is us as a community. We need to come together and figure out how to define it in a way so that somebody else isn't doing it for us. With your background working in RCS and whatnot, I'm curious what you think might, you know, we don't know the answer to this, so we're just pontificating, but where do you think things might go with some of these programs moving forward now that we have RFK Jr. and a Maha movement and all this stuff? Where do you think Regenerative's going to shake out and all that?
I'm optimistic. You know, I'm following the Ag Senate, you know, Senator Bozeman's social media page and constantly going through those updates on kind of the Farm Bill framework. And we have really strong, let me go back. My background in RCS and interaction has been as a producer, learning how to navigate the EQIP, you know, cost share funding and building strong conservation plans. And then I briefly did a stint coming out of finishing some education, working as a soil and water conservation district technician as an affiliate of NRCS, because there's a cooperative agreement between the two going back decades and decades on sharing resources and trainings and office spaces. And so through that, I got an inside look at how NRCS operates. And then I got very familiar with the back end of creating a conservation plan and learning what practices are used for what in order to manage a small, similar technical assistance cost sharing program under the Soil and Water Conservation District. And so tying that back into, so when I was there, I was doing a lot of their Ag Learn training to get familiar with all the different programmings and stuff. And there's a whole department, sub-department within RCS focused just on soil health programming and developing. This was going on for sure in the previous Trump administration through the Obama administration. That's always been an ethos, but we have leadership that has aged out and retired and new leadership that's come in that really started lifting this movement around soil health and ranching and row cropping. So I think it's only going to continue to happen, and especially as more and more people are demanding healthy foods and more research suggests that nourishment ties into our health and well-being and our medical costs and all those things. And so I'm hopeful from what I'm seeing. You know, I did a fly-in with Farm Bureau in April, and we got to sit, that group got me in front of Senator Bozeman, 2 Republican, 2 Democrat leaders in their ag committees, and they gave an overview of where they were at in Farm Bill. This was in April. Everyone was still focused on this big, beautiful bill, right? So, but they were trying to say, here's what we're thinking. And they made me feel pretty confident that while the safety net programming for commodities was going to be a big priority, which is like, I think, Title I within Farm Bill. And then there's several titles in Farm Bill, and they group different parts of it. SNAP is in one, right? So our EQIP and CSP and conservation funding and our soil health initiative stuff is under Title II, which is the conservation stuff. And so I raised my hand and I asked, I was like, hey, this is great for the safety net stuff and all these things, but there's a whole gamut of producers that are shifting their systems to be more resilient, and they're not focused on wanting the safety net subsidies. They want practical assistance and technical assistance in a timely manner that can help them reinvent their systems for the next 100 years. And it seemed that both sides of the aisle want to keep that. I've also since looked at some language and some of the framework for Farm Bill that is suggesting that, we had that freeze in IRA funding, which I barely got through. I had a contract for soil carbon amendment that was funded through the IRA Inflation Reduction Act dollars. And I certified that practice and got my final payment on it 3 weeks before the freeze. So nice. If I hadn't have done that in the timing wise, there would have been about $12,000 on the table that I would have been waiting for, that I'd spent about 6 to 8 out of my own pocket, tapping my toes, wanting to reimbursement on. So there's risks and there's uncertainty, but it's a pretty smooth process, especially compared to some of my mentors that engaged in it earlier on compared to now. I think things are a little more timely. I think I almost got to tying it back to where we're going with it. So within that framework, a lot of those Inflation Reduction Act dollars that were already allocated, they get to go through, but some of the upper level NGO programming for next fiscal years that wasn't allocated and stuff, they pulled that back in. But what I'm seeing in some of the language for how they're going to cycle that, it's going to go right back into the conservation programming in new applications. And I don't know if they're trying to get that out of the entities and directly to farmers and ranchers. I'm not sure of the logic yet, but that's kind of what I'm seeing. But
awesome.
That's not set in stone yet. That has to be voted on. It's going to be picked apart by both sides. And so we'll see what happens with it.
Well, we'll just hope that everyone who eats food supports farmers.
Yeah.
When we were at the last NRCS State Technical Committee meeting, I was given the advice after the meeting by some of the higher ups there to start using the language soil health management, because the word regenerative
is triggering.
Yes, it's triggering to some of these, older farmers, people that have been doing this for a long time. And so
it draws a line in the sand.
Yes.
And kind of that makes people maybe feel left out,
When we started having the conversations with our father about transitioning to regenerative agriculture, the way it was landing for him is that we were telling him everything he'd done for the last 50 years was wrong. And so I think that is what it is.
And that's a good point. And on this journey, I sit on a few stakeholder groups that are very much rural conservative commodity producers. And I've studied a little bit of nonviolent communication through a series of books that really made me early on try to be sensitive when I'm speaking with them about what I'm doing it, sharing it as and making it come off as my passion, and make sure that I'm not pointing a finger. Mm-hmm. Or if I have an idea I want to approach, ask it in a question format versus saying, well, this is why it's not working. Have you ever thought of this, or did you know this, and let them ponder it and go through their own enlightenment on, just like we all are, within this movement. So, and
Connecting
I find
dots.
that to be a good tool to get someone, I see it in their mind, they're perking up, their heads tilting, they're thinking about, and to have one of a good stakeholder that I've interacted with now for 6 or 7 years, that was a fertilizer dealer and a seed dealer and ran a feed store, explained to me that he wanted the microbiology to cycle the nutrients so that he could have grass without inputs. He's not practically full on managing that way, but he said that to me,
that's
and
fantastic.
I was like, cool,
You're like, same.
Yeah. Well, I was telling Dion this morning, so many people that we know in this regenerative movement used to sell fertilizer. Like these are the people who are seeing it and really changing their operations and learning more and wanting to share with people. And they were the ones that sold the fertilizer. This gentleman right over here, Fred Morales.
Yeah.
Same.
Yep.
He recognizes where things are going.
Yeah.
And he is shifting. And he spent 20 minutes with us yesterday, helping us come up with a plan for our land. And it's just like,
that's awesome.
People ask him, why are you doing this? You're taking money out of your own pocket. And he says, this is where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
It's what farmers actually need.
Yeah. They got some useful stuff over there on their table.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they do. So you're speaking this afternoon at 2:00. What is the subject matter?
I think 4:15. Don't scare me like that.
Oh.
I was like, oh man, no. But I'm in the last session of the day in the big picture track room, and the title of it is Local Soil and Water Health Activism. And so, Judith and Mix have gotten to know my background over the years and the experiences that I have, and asked if I wanted to kind of focus on the big picture side of, if you're interested in this, whether you're farming or not, what are your resources as a producer that could be helpful? So we're going to talk about, in our CS programming, we're going to talk about what I told you about my soil and water conservation district background, but also the way to get involved at the board level. Mm-hmm. The boards for your local soil and water conservation district are made up of landowners within the watershed that, the soil and water conservation district resides in. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of opportunity to get the right people in those positions that primarily they're supposed to be elected, and no one shows up to be elected. So they call their friends and neighbors that they know are in that part of the watershed and, volunteer them to say, hey, it's your turn,
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because I went to a farmers roundtable in Austin a few months ago. It was ahead of this stack meeting that I mentioned earlier. And I was telling these people, I'm like, this is the time to show up to these meetings, volunteer for the subcommittees.
100%.
Try to get yourself involved in a role that you have a big voice, because we have farmers aging out. We have people that are so complacent on a lot of these committees because they've been doing it for so long that it's so easy to just rubber stamp something and move on. And so we have all of these really intelligent people that are coming together. We're in this great community, and it's just like, activate it, show up to the meetings, be a part of the group. And you're such a great example of that in Caldwell County for us.
Well, thank you.
And
thank you.
You've been a wonderful mentor for us in getting things going, and you're handy. I mean, it's great having you around.
Yeah, and tying that back to, so I thought about a couple more things while you were expressing some of your thoughts on the need. There's so much opportunity to get involved. Tying that back to your question about my presentation, it's going to be highlighting governmental, local NGO entities that have a lot of very helpful online resources and tools. Some of them have funding pools to provide technical and cost share assistance. We're also going to highlight the opportunities to get involved in your local, your state, your federal activism, right? Whether that's supporting with your dollar, Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance, or showing up like we did to the state capitol and using our voices and our presence to help shift, and influence our leadership on the importance of what we're here, sharing today.
Yep.
And I'm going to try to have it be interactive, kind of gauge the room, who's here, where do we want to spend most of our, hour navigating, and then kind of tailor it from there.
So all of us showing up at the Capitol together, it can feel intimidating, can sound intimidating to just go walk into somebody's office and ask for a meeting. But man, they are so happy to see us when we get there.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
They're like, wow, a constituent.
Yay.
You're
come right in.
Not a lobbyist. You're, sure, if I had hundreds of dollars that I could, slide them in a handshake, they'd probably take it. But
the way they do that is by bringing them really nice lunches. We walked into spaces right at that lunchtime, and,
Oh, yeah.
I remember the first time going, especially for folks that maybe aren't as comfortable in around lots of people in a fast-paced moving environment, which the longer I live in rural, Lockhart, I find myself even having to, I got to go out and practice or else I'm going to continue to want to hibernate,
Yes.
But the hardest thing for me was just getting the lay of the land, these big old mall scale buildings. But once you're there and you have that, and then, if you come to talk about topics that you're really passionate about and you're prepared on, the first one or two, you start figuring out it's not really hard, and especially if you go with a small group to where you're sharing and you're feeding off of each other and you're covering those topics. And then also with this, learning just how important the staffers are that you're meeting with most of the time and how influential they are. They're the gatekeepers of all the information that comes in, and they get to choose kind of the priorities and are very influential and helping with the vote for, whatever senator or congressional member they're working for. And so learning those things is helpful. And I also learned just how influential we can be, especially if we come in and we're not leaning in with our hair raised and in a fury, because of whatever's happening. If you approach it in a respectable way, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, and you tailor your conversation to being familiar with the things that are maybe their priorities or their background, and let them go on that enlightenment journey too, versus rage or some other form of communicating,
And what we've found is that so many of them are young and are interested in being healthy and having healthy foods, and regenerative agriculture is something that they know about, have heard about, and are glad to see us so that they can share that with their senator or representative.
So when we met you, you were already this version of Tim Auld. So what was your aha moment to say, okay, I want to take my family's land and I want to do something different? What inspired that?
Yeah. I'll start with a little background of how through my life I was interacting with that land. I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, did most of my school age through early college there. And in the summer, I'd go get dropped off at the family farm with my great-grandmother, my Oma, and my grandparents. And my grandparents were still in the workforce and Oma was retired. And so we just ran the farm together, went and helped her out in the yard and shot the slingshot, jumped on the trampoline, went and got lost in the cornfields. But we didn't have our last active direct family member that was farming would have been my great granddad briefly, but he shared that responsibility with my great uncle, who was the primary farmer. They partnered together across the 420 acres. And when Lyman died, my great granddad, my uncle Gilbert, took it over. And so he farmed up until the 90s when he got ill, which was around the time that I was in elementary, and I'd go get his mail, bring it down the drive, and he'd let me get some cookies off the table. That was when he was getting real sick. But so he passed, and then it was a handshake agreement with a family friend up the road that continued that row crop, legacy for our family farm up until he's still farming the adjacent family farm, the 320 acres over there. So I was in DFW. I was in the golf industry for a little bit, taking golf pretty seriously. And I was driving in traffic to get to the pro shop, 45 minutes down 360 North, an hour back in gridlock, fast pace of life. And I had this aha moment in the car one day of, I've got two great grandmothers at early 20s. How many people have an opportunity to have, let alone grandparents, have great grandparents? And that's one of the benefits of my mom having me at a relatively young age. And so she was down there by herself doing her thing most of the time. And I was like, I want to go be a part of that and cherish that last bit of her life, help out, with the main farmhouse and whatnot. So I had no plan. I just picked up and left. They let me live in the upstairs. Through that, I found carpentry work and tiny house building, salvage living, and went down a little 7 or 8 year journey of building a house to get a cost of living that could allow me to do this in a slow, holistic, way. So at that time, I started finding and getting into renewable energy. What kind of portfolio of renewables could we interweave into this? Through renewable energy, I found sustainability and the TRIA, Texas Renewable Energy was a organization that would bring all the renewables together and talk about the industry. They used to put on this Green Living Fair in Fredericksburg. Through that, I found some soil health stuff that was starting to pop up, and that kind of continued me down this evolution of resource, environment, soils. How do I want to interact with this land? What vision do I want to build? I found HMI, Holistic Management International, around 2015 and got a scholarship to take their whole farm planning course. And at that point, I was able to really grasp onto a little over half of it, because like the time management, the financial planning, your mission statement, your building your team, who are your stakeholders, like all those things I could grab. But on the forage analysis and some of the enterprise planning stuff, I just read, but I couldn't actively build because there were still 3-4 more years of row cropping happening before I actually, made that jump into taking over. And so there was no forage for me to analyze. It was like bare soil or there's cotton, right? So I could do hypotheticals, but it just didn't hit the same. And so from there, continued, got involved with the Grass-Fed Exchange. I got a scholarship to go there in Albany, New York, and then got involved helping plan the 2020 conference in Fort Worth, and ended up at Texas State, doing some resource environmental studies degree, and then an integrated ag master's. I started that before I left to work for the district. And so that's kind of the journey of how I landed, kind of got my roots. A little period of time where I was talking about it a lot, and the family was like, well, are you going to shit or get off the pot, about this, but it took me needing to, first of all, I didn't grow up farming. We have a family farm, but even understanding why do the row croppers make this tillage pass? Why are they making this spray? Like, I didn't have even that conventional wisdom, which in hindsight allowed me to really go at this with a whole different perspective, because I'm not tied to that paradigm. So that kind of was the journey there. From 2015 to 2020, I really started interacting with NRCS, went through 3 district technicians trying to talk about and advocate for the things that I was wanting to do, and finally landed with one that was like, okay, let's do it. And for me, in my context, that energy and effort to partner with those funds was critical to get some of this foundational infrastructure that I was watching my mentors come to the reality that would be really great to get in place first. It'll make your life and your time management much smoother, and so.
I'm glad I asked that question. I didn't know these things about you.
Yeah.
So there we go.
The origin story.
I like it. Well, so now that you are where you are, and one of the biggest things we need are consumers to make different choices. So what advice do you have for consumers when it comes to agriculture and food and the decisions that they're making?
For sure. I've digested a lot of audiobooks and podcasts on the topic of kind of food as medicine and the role that soil health plays and the welfare of us as individuals and our family. And at a time where we have so many non-communicable diseases and social anxiousness in our individual makeups, there's a growing body of evidence to suggest that how we interact with what we put in our body can heavily influence us one way or the other. And so for consumers that are at the beginning of their journey on really wanting to find food as medicine and support their local producer, knowing that it comes sometimes at a greater upfront cost, but really dive into the benefits that, when your farmer and they can show you soil tests on how healthy and vigorous their soils are. And we have newer technologies that will be coming into market for affordable prices to actually in real time check the quality of your, fruits or vegetables or meats, or it's labeled on the product. That differentiates, that adds value, and that also you're getting more bang for your buck when you can eat less of it and be more satiated. There's a gentleman, Fred Provenza, that's worked with so many folks and written tons of peer-reviewed papers and books on the topic. One that's a really good read, it's dense, but it's important, is Nourishment. And it's kind of learning. He went out in the landscape and observed how livestock and wildlife chose to eat using their nose and their smell and their taste to decide and influence how they ate. And then they studied that and analyzed it and did so many more types of research around that topic. And so there's so many resources out there to guide someone on their journey for how they can use their dollar as their biggest vote to help shift not just their health, but the health of their environment and their community and the social capital that provides and uplifts. So,
Amen.
Yeah, I love it. I was thinking and actually telling Joanna, or we were just talking the other day about the free feeding the minerals to animals and how they feel it. Like the electromagnetic senses, pulses in them cause them to eat the thing that they need to eat and only as much as they need, and then turn around and walk away. And I just feel like tuning in to nature for the land, for the plants, for the animals, for ourselves is only going to make the world a better place. It's going to make us healthier. It's going to make us make good decisions. And that then we can just relax and eat what we want to eat because our body is so in tune that it takes what it needs and it doesn't have to overeat or it doesn't crave those things that aren't good for us because we are in tune. So I love that you said that about
and
that.
I'm hopeful, while you were expressing that, I started thinking about, we're going through an evolution of our food system right now, just like we do when we learn, we vet, we adapt, we overcome with any industry. When we learn that something's not the best or it's impacting us in the way that we as a civilization don't want it, it's a little relatively slow, half a lifetime process to kind of steer the ship when we really get behind it, and there's that whole curve of the innovators or the folks that are crying out before it really gets to that point where it can elevate and take off. And I think with our food system, I'm hopeful that one day when we go into, because we're not going to not have a big box store for a grocery store and stuff like that, but there's people here and some of the organizations that are here are consulting with some of the biggest players in the food industry, whether that's our grain industry or our big meat industry, to shift management to where, I hope that customers want to come to me, to buy directly. I want to feed all the people moving into the neighborhoods that are being developed all around me. But the reality is we're still going to want to go to the grocery store every now and then for staples and things like that. If we can't find them, that the transparency and the dialogue will shift to where, hopefully one day we won't have as big of a concern, on what was in that product because the transparency will be there. We got a lot of work to go, but I'm hopeful that maybe in my lifetime we'll see 60% of the things on the shelf, at least on the perimeter, that we have a little more understanding of where it came from. But I might be naive in that, but
you know what? I had a vision. I was walking through the grocery store and I had literally been on my fourth item that I had looked at every ingredient on each one that was offered to me. And I just had a vision of like, what if all the poison was removed from the grocery store right now? And literally in my mind, I just saw like shelves just dropped down. And so it's still a box store, but it was like a quarter of the size and everything was healthy. You walked into the grocery store, you bought whatever you wanted because all of it was good for you.
Yeah.
And this is the vision that I hold. Like processed food, go away. Like, let's just get rid of all that. But that my mother could walk into the grocery store and buy whatever she wants and it be healthy for her. Because I know that there are plenty of people that are not reading labels. So anyway, I love that vision and we're going to hold that.
Well, and that vision is just taking grocery stores back to where they were when your great grandmother was shopping at them. So is there anything that we didn't ask you that you feel inspired to share or talk about?
I think, one of the things I would be inspired to share is just, it's so motivating to get to these types of conferences and gatherings in this space, in this movement, whether it's in row cropping, whether it's in grazing, whether it's in vegetable production at a market scale. There's hope, there's passion, there's care that you just don't see in other spaces. When I'm in some of my stakeholder group meetings and we're talking ag, it's weighted. It's heavy. So it's really cool to, this is day 5 for me between the grazing school, helping host that, and now day 2 of the conference. And who knows how many steps that I've walked, but I'm still ready. I'm still ready to go. What's next?
You got
it's
energy.
That's really exciting. And I really hope that folks that are listening, if you've never been to this partnered conference, these are your people here if you've liked what we're talking about, and so that's what I have to share in terms of y'all asking other questions. I feel pretty good about it, and I get to talk with y'all enough that it's a joy. So,
yay.
Well, we've been trying to get you behind a mic for a while, so I'm glad that you're just prepping and warming up for your talk later.
Yeah,
so,
I was that
you
livestock
used
in that
us.
paddock that I had to circle around enough that it was time.
Well, we still want to have you into the radio station and talk on KLKT because I want more folks in our community to hear that there is a regenerative crew in their county that are there for them and are rallying to make big changes in our little town.
Yep. Buzz is out.
It is.
I hear birds chirping all around.
I love it.
About Lockhart and having kind of this little hearth of folks that are into it. So,
and exciting news. We raised enough money to get Matt Power's Regenerative Soil textbook for the Lockhart ISD Career and Technical Education group for agriculture and for the Floral Design group and Apogee Lockhart and the Soilutions Holistic Ag group in Dallas, our friend Arlena Brumfeld that we met at Regen Ag School through Holistic Management International. She does an inner city program. So we got enough books for her program and also Jayton High School where we went to school.
So
awesome. We're going to have in 3 different counties, we're going to be able to start getting this regenerative soil education to students.
I'm so proud of y'all. I saw the amount of effort that went into the planning and the dialogue to even try to put that thing together. So exciting stuff.
Well, and thank you for being there and for sharing your voice.
Oh my gosh, and your beautiful music.
Oh my gosh.
Your songs.
I'm so bashful.
Oh my gosh, you can be bashful all day long. And I'm telling you, it was beautiful. The words are so meaningful. And it's everything that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So it was great.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That was nice. The next day I ended up going to play the open mic because it's like, well, I'm going to have to put myself out, out in front of people for this 5-day stretch. So I was like, well, I might as well
do it again.
Start getting on the stage there and be vulnerable there. And that way this is a little easier. So, and I think it was helpful actually.
Yeah.
So
good.
Yeah, I went to open mic. I saw Crystal and the 4-string animals perform, and then I was like, I got to stay for Tim. So yeah, it was great. We have a wonderful little community.
Yeah, agreed.
So good.
Well, thank you for hanging out with us, and thank you for being a mentor and a friend. We appreciate you.
Likewise.
And for being tribe. Like we are coming together, and I feel that with Lockhart, just like connections that are being made that are so powerful and important. So anyway, I love what you're doing and I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Likewise. Glad to know y'all.
Yes.
Connect with the Soil Sisters at txsoilsisters.co. Submit questions, guest or show ideas, and sponsorship inquiries. The Soil Sisters podcast was created and produced by Joanna Nuding. Editing and sound design are in the capable hands of the PodConnects Podcast Network.